bring on our good friend Mike McAllister, who we pulled him away from family time to talk with us today. That's dedication. Mike, we really appreciate you doing this. This is a big deal, right? Calvin Russell, Paulie and I have been debating for the first half hour just how big of a deal this is for Syracuse football. So we will ask you, this is your area of expertise. How big of a deal is this for the program?
It's the biggest deal on the recruiting front in the last 25 years. I'll say that. He's the highest rated recruit that they've had in that time frame since the 24/7 Sports database goes all the way back. I believe previously it was Cecil Howard, the 5-star quarterback that never ended up actually playing at Syracuse, played a little bit at Youngstown State. But this is a huge deal. And the fact that you had Michigan and Oregon and Florida State and Miami, and he's got strong family ties to Miami. His mom, I believe, is still the all-time leading scorer for the Miami women's basketball team. And the fact that you get that kid out of Florida with those schools after him when he visited all of those schools and didn't take an official visit to yours, I think that tells you a lot about Fran Brown, the culture he's building, and how recruits are buying it.
How surprised were you that be honest, how surprised were you on, Saturday night when this thing, went public?
So I would say about a week before the announcement, I felt pretty good about where Syracuse stood. And then as the week was going, there was a lot of Michigan chatter. Now, I think some of that was a little bit by design because it was very clear to me that Calvin Russell wanted nobody to know where he was going into the announcement. He wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted to have his moment where he could announce it. Didn't want it leaking out from other people or, recruiting analysts putting in crystal ball predictions, etc. And so even though there was that Michigan chatter, the thing that kept me thinking I'm still thinking Syracuse is in a good spot going into the announcement was the fact that on none of the networks, the major national recruiting analysts that are usually the most plugged in, have the best sources, and pretty much know where almost everyone is going before they announce, none of them was willing to put in a prediction that would have impacted their accuracy percentage. So that told me that nobody really knew. And the fact that nobody knew, and I felt good about where Syracuse stood about a week before the announcement, I still felt going into it that it was going to be Syracuse, but I wouldn't say that I thought it was a sure thing by any means. But I know there were a lot of Michigan fans that seemed completely shocked that he picked Syracuse over Michigan. I don't think anyone that was actually paying attention throughout the entire recruitment should have been completely floored that he picked Syracuse. You could be a little bit surprised that at the end he picked Syracuse over some of the other blue blood schools, thinking that ultimately those schools would have won out with deeper pockets or whatever the case may be. But being completely floored and shocked and you didn't see this one coming, that probably is someone who was not paying attention to his recruitment throughout his entire process.
I've been playing the devil's advocate in this situation with the Syracuse fan base, and is there anything to be worried about at this point? National letter of intent day is in February. The early signing period ended December. Will they make it to that point? And is this a solid lock?
Well, as I said before, with the fact that he took official visits to all of those other schools and didn't take one to Syracuse, I think is a feather in Syracuse's cap. Recruiting is always good, so you never say anything is a complete lock until they actually sign. And even then, after they sign, they could still decide to enter the transfer portal before they actually play it down for you. So nothing is ever completely done and finalized, and you always have something to worry about. But the fact that he visited all those other schools, hasn't taken his official visit to Syracuse yet, so he still can this fall or even right before signing day, is a strong indicator in Syracuse's favor. It's not one of those situations where Syracuse gets a kid early, he blows up, and then all these other schools start coming at him and get late visits, and you kind of have to bite your nails up until signing day. A lot of that process has already happened, so there's not much new there that theoretically could happen outside of someone throwing an incredible amount of money at him that they're not throwing at him now. Again, that's possible, but I think the fact that he's got the strong relationship with Fran Brown, the fact that he did visit those other schools, and the fact that he is quoted as saying, "I'm shutting down my recruitment," you hope that he's you can trust his word and feel good about the culture that Syracuse is building, and that he would be signing with Syracuse on signing day.
Now, Mike, there's the added element of basketball to this whole thing, right? That he's a highly touted basketball player as well. I think he averaged 21 points per game as a junior. He has indicated he wants to play both in college. How much did that factor into his decision? And how will this work? I mean, it's been a while since we've seen kind of a two-sport star here. And Paulie and I were talking about McNabb back in the day, but how do you see this? How do you see this working at Syracuse if he plays both sports?
Yeah, Syracuse basketball was definitely a factor here. Now, I think the relationship with Fran Brown and that is the number one factor in why Calvin Russell ultimately picked Syracuse. But certainly basketball was a factor here. Syracuse was one of, if not the earliest school to tell him that they were willing to allow him to play both sports, and that was extremely important to him. There have been communications with the Syracuse basketball coaching staff, so everyone is on board and is ready for this. Exactly how it's going to work from a logistical standpoint, when does he practice with the basketball program? How much does that impact what he's doing to prepare for football and all of that? I'm not 100% sure on how that's going to work. I would assume similar to the way it's passed. You go through the season and you join the basketball program and you can kind of do some stuff in between. But what I'm most curious about is he's supposed to enroll in January, it's my understanding. So if he does enroll in January, does he join the basketball program at that point and can start practicing with them midway through the season? Does he have the ability to potentially get on the court if he shows flashes of something, or if there's a need for him at a certain position? That's what I find the most fascinating, is does he join the basketball program in January when he is supposed to arrive on campus?
That's really interesting. And from a scholarship standpoint, I assume he would count against the football program, but not against the basketball program, right? He would be considered technically a walk-on because he's got the scholarship through football, correct?
That's correct. Now, the basketball team still has roster limits that they have to adhere to, but he would not count against their scholarship count, is my understanding.
Interesting. Go ahead, Paulie.
Mike, we were talking about all the positive stuff, and then we see today that King Joseph Edwards has entered the transfer portal. Did you see that coming, and are you surprised by it?
Not a complete shock. There's always rumblings you hear behind the scenes about things, but I was surprised that it happened now. I know that there was that summer window, the one-time thing that the NCAA approved under special circumstances. Wasn't sure it was going to happen now. I kind of was thinking maybe it would happen after next season, but either way, you wish him the best. And as someone in my comments said, they've got 7 other transfer portal windows. They needed a one-time special one as well. And it's not one I think that a lot of players are going to utilize, but I think in a case like this with King Joseph Edwards, it's good for him because he can go find another school and start working with them. And it's seems to be pretty clear that both sides were ready to move on.
I said to Paulie earlier in the show that I feel like Syracuse football is the healthiest it's been since McNabb, since '98, and I'll even 2001. Dwight Freeney was such a big part of that team, but I feel like we were already starting to see things trend in the wrong direction by 2001. They had a great year, but things really fell off after that. Would you agree with that statement? And I know it was just 1 year under Fran Brown, and we're about to see year 2, but is this the healthiest they've been in your mind since the late '90s?
Since the late 90s, I wouldn't say 1998 because it kind of fell off like right after that when Donovan left, but maybe he arrived like 95, 96 when he arrived, and they had 3 to 4 really, really strong years, and everyone kind of thought that was going to continue. And then we all know Mike Vick ends up going to Virginia Tech, and things didn't go as planned after that. And they've kind of been trying to get back to that point, but it certainly feels like they are in the process of getting back there with the quality of players that they're adding, the wins that they're having on the recruiting trail, the success they're having in the transfer portal. And then year 1 of Fran Brown couldn't have gone much better. I know you guys outlined 1 or 2 plays away from being in the playoff, but it's still hard to think of a much better season than a 10-win season in year 1 under Fran Brown. And he showed that even though he was a brand new head coach, and sure, there's certain things that I'm sure he'll want to work on and get better at, didn't seem like it was too much for him to move from position coach to head coach. I know that was a big concern going into the year. So, yeah, it feels like the program is in fantastic shape from a talent acquisition standpoint, from a coaching standpoint. And the biggest thing is going to be, as you guys have mentioned, their ability to keep Fran Brown when other schools come knocking, because they're going to, and I would suspect that they're going to as early as this coming off season.
Mike, what does this say about Syracuse's NIL? Do you think that played a big factor in this, in their ability to get a 5-star kid? And how much do you think it played going forward, and will it play in high school recruiting?
Yeah, I think it's a positive, because you have to you have to be in the same stratosphere as these other blue blood programs to be able to compete with these level of recruits. For example, if Calvin Russell's being offered $100,000 to come play at Syracuse and is being offered $3 million to go play basically everywhere else, that's a lot more difficult than if the numbers were 1.5 for Syracuse and $2 million for other schools, right? So the fact that Syracuse was able to win a battle like this with so many other big time programs with deep pockets, I think speaks positively to the way that Syracuse's NIL is heading in terms of football. And we know that Fran Brown has said he wants to build the program from high school recruiting up. That's what he believes is the groundwork, is the framework for building a successful football program, not necessarily having to completely reinvent your roster through the portal every year, but using that as a supplemental factor in terms of acquiring talent. And what he's doing in the recruiting trail is following that model that he outlined. And we know that everything they've done from an NIL perspective, they held these events, they've held these golfing events, and we know the Lally Foundation and the NIL collectives that they've got all in place have played a significant part in getting Syracuse football NIL up to a point where they can compete for recruits like this.
You know, Steve, it is a good day in Syracuse. The sun is out. The birds are chirping. In Mike McAllister's house right now. Is there a bluebird going to land on your shoulder there, Mike?
There's not, but I'm not in Syracuse, so you can.
Where are you?
I'm in Maine at the moment, actually, on vacation.
Oh, nice.
Yes, I have the beach about 10 feet from me.
I said we pulled him away from family time.
I know, but that's great. The birds are chirping. 5 stars are signing.
Sounds like a beautiful place. The sun is shining on Mike's face as well. Yeah. Last question from me, Mike. Paulie said earlier in the show, this is just one recruit, Steve, and let's see how it all plays out. I feel like this is more than just one recruit, though. This feels like when you get a 5-star to commit, not that it's going to open up the floodgates necessarily, but I feel like it makes it okay for other 5-stars to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to Syracuse. You do this for a living. How big of a deal is it, not just to get this young man in particular, but the fact that any 5-star said yes to Syracuse?
It was all over every single recruiting network all day Saturday as far as the announcement that Syracuse was in the mix. It was all over sports coverage Saturday and Sunday. It was on ESPN's website. I believe it hit their bottom line as well on some of their programming. It was everywhere. Every single major sports outlet had coverage of this. So it's a big deal. It sends a message, and it's something that you look at his high school, Northwestern High School in Miami, Florida. And Syracuse has multiple players from that school on the roster right now, including their freshman wide receiver, Boobie Johnson, who had a pretty strong spring game, and he and Calvin Russell are very good friends. So I think that helps, and the fact that they're after another kid that's on that team, Tadarius Hughes, who's currently committed to Florida State. He took an official visit to Syracuse this summer. He's someone that they're going to try to flip between now and signing day. So it's always about relationships, and it's always those always play a factor in it. But certainly, anytime you land a commit of this stature, where your brand, your school is out there, basically in every single sports circle, recruits see that, fans see that, and it might be sort of an average day for a school like a Michigan or an Oregon or those types to land someone like this. For Syracuse, it certainly raises the eyebrows more so than what the other schools would have done.
Mike, how much has this change? The Fran Brown hiring changed your job? How different is it from when Dino was here to now? That how many more eyes are on you, and how much has your job changed with this?
I wouldn't say it's changed much in that I still cover recruiting the same way. We're still covering the players that they're after, and still kind of do the same things when they land a player. The difference is the caliber of player is certainly upticked quite a bit, and they can be a little bit more difficult to track down for interviews. And you saw with all the drama Saturday night, right, with Calvin Russell being late to his announcement, and there seemed to be some traffic issues, and then there were the early quote unquote reports from random Twitter accounts with 300 followers saying they knew where he was going, and then other places seeming to go with that, and before he had even arrived at his announcement venue. So a lot of that drama is a little bit different than what we typically see, but it's fun covering 5-star recruits and high caliber 4-star recruits, and having those players commit to the school that you're covering certainly is a fun thing to do. And it's part of why I got into recruiting in general. It's just, I love that whole dynamic of players trying to pick which school they're going to, and the whole recruiting process, and then the commitment, and then trying to get them the signing day. I've always been fascinated by it, and adding, a higher caliber of player certainly makes it more interesting from my perspective.
I've not big into the recruiting, but I found myself watching high school kids tell me where they were going to school on Saturday night. I watched 2 of them. I wasn't proud of myself. I was like, I'm home on a beautiful Saturday night watching high school kids put on hats.
I think that was the only disappointing part of Calvin Russell's commitment, was that he said, "Yeah, I watched University of Syracuse."
I watched the other kid that picked Louisville.
Yeah.
Also.
All right. Mike, you are very good at what you do, and you are a good man for stepping away for a moment on your vacation to do this with us on such a big day. We very much appreciate it. Apologize to your wife for us.
Go
Enjoy
play with
the rest of your trip, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Trust me, I would not be here if I did not have permission from the wife, so don't worry.
Smart man. Very smart man. Mike McAllister joining us here on the show, and with that, we'll hit a timeout. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next on ESPN Radio.